Welcome to The Huddle with Dr. Lisa Petit, the podcast where we tackle every parenting challenge with real strategies from a pediatrician and mom. I'm here to help you parent with more confidence, less guilt, and a whole lot more clarity. Whether you're dealing with tantrums, screen time, or just trying to make it through the week, this is your place to reset, refocus, and feel supported. So let's huddle up. Hi, and welcome to the Huddle Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Petit, pediatrician. I'm a mom, and I am your coach on the field as you navigate the ups and downs of parenting. So today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic. It's this trend called positive parenting. It's the idea that you should only use positive praising language and talking and explanations with your child instead of punishment so that you don't hurt their feelings or hurt their self-esteem. Now, while that sounds very noble, there are definitely some problems with it. And so today we're going to talk about positive parenting, what it is, and then we're also going to talk about some more realistic and effective parenting strategies. So first, we're going to start with a question that I hear just about every week, or maybe even several times a week in my office. Patients will say, Dr. Petit, I'm trying to be positive with my parenting. I'm trying to use positive parenting, but it just feels like my child is running the show and it's just not working. Yeah, does that sound familiar? Maybe you've even heard online advice that says that you should never say no to your child, or that you should just validate their feelings and move on when they're having a tantrum or when they're very upset. And while I am all for validating your child, being emotionally aware and having that emotional intelligence, that's really where the confusion starts. So positive parenting has become more of a buzzword, and like many buzzwords, there are several meanings and it kind of gets diluted in the process. So when people hear positive, they think of being endlessly patient, not raising your voice, always saying yes, making sure your child never feels sad or disappointed or uncomfortable. The truth is that's not positive parenting, that's permissive parenting. And there's a big difference. There are actually 4 types of parenting styles, which we can definitely discuss in one of my future podcasts. But there are 4 types. There's authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and neglectful. So each of these parenting styles reflects some level of emotional connection balanced with limit setting and boundaries. So when you're talking about a permissive parenting style, what you're really talking about is a really high emotional connection, which is wonderful. We want to actually have that connection with our children, but there's very little limit setting and very few boundaries. So what you end up with is a parent who is very emotionally connected with their child. The child is very emotionally connected with the parent, but there is not always a very clear line as to what the rules are, where the boundaries are, and what happens when we cross those boundaries. And when you blur that line between being supportive, which is a great thing, and being permissive, then the child actually suffers. Sometimes it's not immediate, but definitely in the long run, they actually don't learn how to tolerate frustration. We call that frustration tolerance, where when they get frustrated, they don't know how to deal with it, so they can sometimes act out. They also don't learn that actions have consequences. They don't learn how to navigate boundaries, whether it's with an authority figure, a peer, a friend, a sibling. And later on, even when it gets to romantic relationships, they definitely have trouble with managing those boundaries. And then they also don't learn resilience. They don't know how to bounce back from a mistake because you've never taught them that they make a mistake and that there is life after being upset or feeling guilty, or just having gotten caught doing something wrong. So I once had a patient actually tell me, the parent said, "We've tried everything. I just want bedtime to be peaceful." And as we walked through their routine, it actually sounded like the 4-year-old was the one calling the shots. So the child decided whether or not to brush their teeth. They decided whether to wear pajamas or the fire truck costume. They decided whether or not they wanted to use the tablet before bedtime. So the parents thought they were being positive by letting the child decide all these things. And what was the result? There was a power struggle every single day on the way to bed. By the end of it, the parents were exhausted. The child was having their tantrum and then ended up getting what they wanted. But the child actually never really learns how to regulate themselves, how to wind down and kind of turn off the go, go, go button that seems to be permanently on with 4-year-olds. So kids need to be able to know that they have some freedom, but within limits, because otherwise it's a free for all and they don't really know that you're the one in charge and they don't pick up that you actually care about them. So what should we do instead? So here's what I recommended for that family, as well as what I recommend as I'm teaching the parenting playbook and my parenting classes. Empathize first. This is a great place to start because when the child feels seen, when they feel secure, they also feel safe. They feel like you're there and you're going to listen to them so they don't actually have to act out and have a huge tantrum. They're less likely to have that meltdown. Now, you don't have to have a 30-minute heart-to-heart where you break down all the specifics of why they feel the way they feel and all of those things. Sometimes it's just as simple as getting down on their level, making eye contact, and saying, "Yeah, I know you're really enjoying your game, but it is time for bed, so that way you have enough energy to play tomorrow." Or, something like, "I know that you're really having a lot of fun and it's never fun to have to stop. No one enjoys having to stop the games." So you're letting them know that you're connecting with them. That doesn't mean you're avoiding the correction, but it means that you're starting off with some empathy, and that can go a long way. Next, you want to make sure that you are setting very clear expectations. So setting rules does not mean that you're being mean. For example, if I run a red light and I get pulled over by the cops, well, the cops aren't being mean to me. They're enforcing rules that are actually there for my safety and the safety of other drivers on the road. So it's actually kind of comforting knowing that there are rules that are in place that can actually make a child feel safer in this big giant world that is often really huge and unpredictable. So having those rules at home, having those clear expectations are critical for your child to feel that safety and feel that security. So you can be kind, but you can also be firm. And that's really where that sweet spot is. So you can say, "I know you're having fun, but screen time is over in 5 minutes and then it's going to be time for bed." So you're letting them know what's going to happen, but you're also laying the foundation for them to be able to mentally adjust to what's coming. The next thing I recommend is to make sure that you have consistent consequences. So kids don't always need a long lecture. Matter of fact, their attention span when they're young is very short, and after a few words, honestly, you sound like one of the adults in the Peanuts cartoon, that womp, 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 womp kind of sound. Kids learn from actions. They learn from consequences. That means that the consequences need to be predictable and they need to be calmly delivered. So, they tend to be more responsive when you're not screaming at the top of your lungs. And they need to be reasonably connected to the behavior. So, for example, let's say your child is playing with a toy and it's bedtime. You've already given them a 5-minute warning that, we're going to bed in 5 minutes. And when you say, "All right, it's time for bed," your child throws the toy. Now, anyone who has lived with a toddler can tell you that this is very frustrating, to say the least. And sometimes all you want to yell is, "Come on, why are you throwing toys? I already gave you a warning and this is ridiculous," and blah, blah, blah. But instead of all that, if you just say something like, well, when you throw toys at bedtime, that means that we're not going to be able to play with toys just before bed. So maybe let's try that again. You can even give the toy back and give them another chance. Now, if they throw it again, okay, great. They've made their decision. No more toys at bedtime. You're not shaming them. You're not giving a lecture. You're just following through. And the most important thing is to make sure that you actually follow through. So the next time, even if you have to write yourself a little sticky note, you have to remember that we don't do the toys at bedtime. That's it. The more immediate the consequence, the better. So maybe in that instance, you can say, when you throw toys, we're not able to do the other fun things at bedtime, like reading the story or singing a song, because when you can't follow my directions and react calmly, then we can't get that reward later. Call it a day. And then lastly, one critical step that I like to emphasize with parents is to give choices. And this is very important, especially if you have a child who has been diagnosed with ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder, or any other condition, or really any other situation where a child has some trouble with emotional regulation. So whenever possible, I like to give maybe 2 or 3 choices. And that way you at least can act like you don't care what they choose, because that's their option. But make sure to let them experience and know what happens and what the consequences are with these choices, whether it's good or bad. So let's say you are letting your child dress themselves in the morning. You might say something like, hey, would you like to wear the red t-shirt or the blue t-shirt today? They might say, I want to wear the princess costume. Well, that might not necessarily be on the menu. You gave them 2 choices, red shirt or blue shirt. If they are insisting on the princess costume, then maybe you need to make the decision for them this time, but let them know that in the future, these are the options they have. When you let them choose, though, when you build in that choice, the child actually starts developing a sense of autonomy because you've given them a choice, red shirt or blue shirt, and you've sort of narrowed down the menu so that they're not necessarily going to be as inclined to give you a power struggle. It's a win-win situation. So when you can build that autonomy in, that is wonderful. So let me tell you this. Of course, I've given some great advice here, but it's not always easy. In a perfect world, your child would get up, dress themselves, feed themselves, and be ready to be out of the door on time on their own. But if your house is anything like mine, with my 3 kids, those perfect mornings are few and far between. I've had mornings as a mom where I don't have the time or the bandwidth to let them take 15 minutes to choose which shoes they're going to wear. At the end of the day, sometimes you just have to get going out the door. The goal here is not to have every morning be perfect or to have every situation just gleam perfection. The goal is to have progress. So when you focus on having that emotional connection first, when you focus on having clear expectations and you are as consistent as possible, you will see that growth and improvement. This is actually just like learning a new sport. As time goes on, the kids begin to understand the rules of the game. They learn to trust you, that you are the head coach and that you mean what you say, and that your goal is for everyone to win. They also feel empowered to make better choices, not just to avoid punishment, but because they understand their role, their position on the team, and they understand that we are all working together for this team that we're calling our family. And that's the heart of what I teach in the Parenting Playbook. It's not about being perfect. It's about building a parenting plan that is warm and strong, supportive and structured. You don't have to choose between love and boundaries. You can and should do both. So if you've been exploring the idea of positive parenting, or if you are currently trying positive parenting and it doesn't seem to be working in your house, here's the key takeaway from this episode. First, don't confuse positive parenting with permissive parenting. 2, you want to lead with empathy and connection, but don't skip out on having structure and boundaries. And number 3, be calm, be the confident coach that your child needs, and have that consistency with the consequences and with the outcomes. Now, if this resonated with you, please check out the Parenting Playbook. That's where I share real-life tools, downloadable resources, and strategies for parents that work in everyday situations, from toddler tantrums to the good old teen pushback. Thank you for joining me in today's huddle. Remember, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, share it with a friend, leave a review, or tag me at Real Parenting Playbook on Instagram or Facebook. Your support helps more parents feel confident, capable, and connected. So until next time, you've got this, and I've got your back. Thanks for joining me today in The Huddle. If today's episode helped you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Have a question or a suggestion for a topic? You can submit your ideas at www.yourparentingplaybook.com/huddle. Your question might be featured on the show, and it could help another family along the way. That's all for today's huddle. See you next time as we keep tackling these parenting challenges together.